This changes everything and potentially can be pretty bad, because Russians discovered secret tunnels under Avdiivka to go behind Ukrainian positions. At the same time, approximately 400,000 Russian soldiers right now are active in Ukraine. But don't worry, it's not all that doom and gloom today, because Ukrainians already started to consolidate their positions on the left side of Kherson region. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's get straight to the point and talk about some ridiculous Russian propaganda. So, okay. Calm down. So yes, today we have a very pretty much even detective story. So sit back, relax and enjoy. Long story short, last weekend approximately 77 Russian pilots, they were celebrating something when suddenly an unannounced courier bringing a very suspicious but tasty looking cake. He brought this cake and then suddenly disappeared. Later, to even be realized that he bought a plane ticket and tried to escape Russia, and almost forgot, besides cake, there was the whole box of whiskey. And then, whenever the guests, they started to get hungry for some sweet deal, they started cutting the cake. One of Russian pilots, he suddenly realized something. Hey guys, did even anyone order this cake, and where is the courier even? Did anyone pay him? And then suddenly everyone was just like, wait a second, are we about to be poisoned? And just as they predicted, they tested the cakes and whiskey later just to find out that yes, indeed, it was extremely unsafe to eat them. Obviously, the entire Russian media was talking about this incident and saying about the heroic motives and fortune-telling, future-looking capabilities of this Russian pilot, which saved almost 100 participants. I will not be surprised if he will be awarded a medal later. And then, obviously, the Russian FSB, just the modern KGB, started looking for this courier. And apparently this was a 33-year-old, obviously Ukrainian from Melitopol, who got married to a Russian woman long time ago. They were living in Russia for a very long time. And since the beginning of this war, with the cooperation with the defense intelligence of Ukraine and probably Zelensky himself, they were planning this attack against almost 100 of Russian pilots. And obviously, the brave FSB was able to capture this infiltrator. They were questioning him, and suddenly, just within 24 hours, he voluntarily gave out all of this information, surrendered and acknowledged that, yes, I'm Ukrainian, I did this. And if you guys think that all of this sounds a little bit too good to be true for the Russian propaganda purposes, can you please like this video and subscribe to my channel, because I'll be very curious to see the analytics of this video later. I mean, just think about it. Ukrainian infiltrated Russians. He tried to poison 100 Russian potential heroes, pilots, and then he got captured. He acknowledged that he was wrong. He set everyone responsible for this, obviously top Ukrainian officials. Just a perfect case scenario for the Russian propaganda. But okay, enough with detectives, now let's get serious and let me give you a brief update from the south of Ukraine, where Ukrainians started to consolidate their positions on the left side of Kherson region, and then we'll go to the east and talk about these underground tunnels that Russians discovered and are allegedly using in Avdiivka. And so, first of all, according to Ukrainians fighting in the south, even more of them started crossing Dnipro river in already new location, to the east of Kozachyi Lageri. It has even been confirmed by the report by the Institute for the Study of War, first from October 20th, which mentioned that Ukrainians continue their bigger than usual cross-river operations, trying to cross Dnipro river, and they even were able to gain the foothold foothold. And then the next day, October 21st, the very same report mentioned that Russians are struggling a lot to protect the coastline of Dnipro River, and they basically cannot do anything against Ukrainians landing on the other side. And indeed, as you can see right here, the contested territory expanded just a little bit. It is a slow process, but it is happening now, it is confirmed. And one of the new things that Russians are trying to do is that they send not smart gliding bombs against Ukrainians trying to cross the river. And because the accuracy of them is not that precise, the destructions are often happening against the civilian infrastructure as well. I am personally expecting that the situation in the south will develop pretty rapidly, hopefully, in the near future, and I'll be closely looking after this situation. And so right now, as promised, let me give you a very brief update also from the east, but before this, let me quickly mention the importance of air defense and long-range munition for Ukrainians. But first of all, let's make a quick stop in Rostov, where recently the locals were once again able to hear some very loud noises in the sky. And as we go back to Ukraine, over this weekend something really bad happened. You probably already heard about this. Is that the local Ukrainian postal office in Kharkiv, Ukropochta, it has been targeted precisely by a Russian missile. But what makes this situation even more outrageous are the statements by Russian propagandists, such as for example Margarita Simonyan, who mentioned that this was actually a local military base of Ukrainians, and they were keeping their Western armored personnel carriers, infantry combat fighting vehicles and tanks in this postal office, including, pay attention here, tanks inside trucks. This is just unbelievable what sometimes Russian propagandists can say, and even more unbelievable that there are still people who believe them. And in order for me to prove that she is lying, and will take only 5-10 seconds, here is the security camera footage from the inside of the postal office. And as you can see, not a single military-related equipment object or, to say the least, tank is spotted inside. And a lot of such attacks Russians perform using their fighter jets, which estimatedly Russia has still 436 of them. And right here is the picture of every single airfield that Russians can use to launch their military planes, including the ones located on occupied territories of Ukraine. But nevertheless, the Ukrainian air defense system is still exceptionally good and was able to intercept all 13 Russian Shahed drones in the last 24 hours and also one missile. But as you can see, sometimes it only takes one to cause devastating effects and also have casualties among, unfortunately, civilians, which only once again confirms the extreme importance for Ukrainians to have an advanced air defense system and also long-range munition, so that they will be able to attack distant targets of Russians, such as airfields and military fighter jets located far behind the front lines. And so yes, now as promised, let me give you a brief update from the east of Ukraine before we can talk about these underground tunnels in Avdiivka. And the very first thing we do is to refer once again to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, which mentions that Russians continue their offensive attempts along Kupiansk-Svatovo-Kryminno front line. And Ukrainians, they are extremely good at protecting these borders every single day for several months straight. And just for example, right here we have a video from Ukrainian Special Force called Kraken, which shows the compilation of their own combat footage and drone footage of them obliterating advancing Russians in Kupiansk direction. So pretty much after watching this video, which I highly recommend for you to do, you will see exactly why Russians are not able to advance for pretty much the entire year. And yes, the full uncensored 12-minute version you will be able to find on my Patreon, in addition to early access to fully uncensored The Russian Dude episodes. The support for the channel starts only as little as $4 per month. I absolutely appreciate these guys so much. The link to my Patreon is down below in the description. There is 1 week of free access for you to see if you like it or not. Thank you so much. But it is not just Kupiansk. Right here is the video from Svatove, for example, where only one Ukrainian soldier, was able to stop the advancement of the entire infantry fighting vehicle full of Russian soldiers using Stugna. And besides that, as you can see from this map, Ukrainians are not only defending their land, they're also able to recapture some of it, as you can see from this map. But unfortunately, Russians just keep going. And some cities, for example, like Klishivka, located to the south of Bakhmut, which has been under constant pressure by Russians for several months straight until being liberated by Ukrainians. At this point, unfortunately, this is the way Klishivka looks like. And to me personally, it does not look like it has been liberated by Russians as they claim. Even more unsuccessful attempts by Russians to breach Ukrainian defenses happened more to the south, for example in Marinka, and this attack has been also successfully repelled by Ukrainians. And just overall, in the last 24 hours alone, Ukrainians were able to destroy 12 Russian tanks and 22 other armored military vehicles, allegedly in the east alone. But if you take a look at these even more interesting statistics, in only 1 month, Ukrainians using drones were able to destroy $141 million worth more of Russian military equipment. And just pay attention here, because the average cost of one Ukrainian drone is only $400. Once again, proving this to be an extremely good investment. But the war keeps going, and Russians keep sending their reinforcements to Ukraine pretty much every single day, such as, for example, according to Andriy Yusov, he estimates that approximately 400,000 Russian soldiers right now are active on the territory of Ukraine, and this partial mobilization announced by Putin more than a year ago, it pretty much never officially stopped. Yes, Russian authorities might have claimed that we mobilized whoever we needed, but still, every single day, couple hundred, couple thousand more are still being recruited, lied to, and sent to Ukraine. But without a doubt, the most significant combat activities recently are happening in Avdiivka, where Russians are trying to advance, every single day, being stopped by Ukrainians daily. Even the Institute for the Study of War confirms that Russians absolutely have no regards in terms of their losses both in infantry and military vehicles, and they keep bringing troops every single day to this direction. And then the Russian military bloggers themselves, they acknowledge that the number of losses are huge, they're record-breaking, and no significant advancements have been made since beginning of Avdiivka so-called operation. And one of the reasons for this, according to also Russian military bloggers, it is both Russians and Ukrainians established so stable, let's call them like this, defense fortifications, is that it is extremely pretty much impossible for the military vehicles to effectively maneuver without being noticed by either of the sides, which is good for Ukrainians. They're not trying to advance as of right now, but every single time Russians try to do it, they're pretty much in the open field for the Ukrainian artillery. And because Russian losses are absolutely significant in Avdiivka alone, probably at some point they might even exceed Bakhmut losses. And this also includes the military vehicles. Russians started using the trucks, which were developed in 1932, to bring even more infantry to the front line, and inevitably most of them are being destroyed within the first minutes. But you know what? These Russian soldiers still somehow can consider themselves lucky, because other Russian soldiers, they have to advance to the front lines literally on their own foot, being even more easy target for Ukrainians. And even according to Avdiivka military administration Vitaly Barabash, He mentions and pretty much confirms that yes, Russians attack and bring forces every single day, and one of their main goals is to surround and cut all the logistics of Ukrainians to the west of the city. But unfortunately, besides Ukrainian soldiers, it also severely affects Ukrainian civilians still living inside Avdiivka, because they're not able to evacuate them, obviously, at all. As soon as there are any attempts by Ukrainians to drive away from Avdiivka, whether these are injured soldiers or civilians, Russians immediately, without any warnings, they open the fire and start the artillery attacks. But the most surprising event which happened in Avdiivka, according to the Ukrainian military representative Andrei Kotsukon, is that Russians reportedly started even finding and digging underground tunnels, which lead closer to Ukrainian positions. I mean, in some way, I gotta give them some credit. Is that it is a relatively smart thing to do, because if you cannot absolutely advance on the ground, you should go underground. But as for now, Ukrainians already know about the existence of such tunnels, so they will be planning their new defenses accordingly. And the main reasons for these tunnels is, once again, to just unexpectedly for Russians jump out behind Ukrainian defenses, or also maybe at least to bring reinforcements to some closer to the frontline positions. And there are even some reports of Ukrainians spotting remote controlled cars bringing ammunition or even some weapons to Russians next to the front lines, also sometimes using the above mentioned tunnels. As for now, this news just came to our attention only recently, so we do not know yet the actual size of such tunnels. But I mean, most likely they do exist, so Ukrainians need to once again act accordingly. They cannot let Russians expand the network of underground connections, otherwise this potentially might change the situation in Avdiivka against Ukrainians. But nevertheless, as of right now, Russians are still just trying to send waves after waves of Russian soldiers, trying to encircle Ukrainians in Avdiivka, and at the cost of, at this point, thousands of lives. This is how much they are able to advance recently, which is not that significant, but there is an advancement to the north of Avdiivka. So let's see. This situation is very similar to the situation in Bakhmut, but with one big difference, is that Russians are trying some new tactics, such as, for example, these underground tunnels. So it will be very interesting to see how Ukrainians will react and respond, and I will always be here to give you any new major and minor developments. So if you don't want to miss any of these crucial updates, just please once again subscribe to my channel. It only takes one click. Thank you so much, my patrons, for your support, and see you tomorrow.